Honey.
Hi, man.
Hello.
Well, I hope everybody had a great lunch. I'm still kind of having mine. It's been a busy day. Bentley, I'm going to have to log off as I have a meeting at 1 o'clock. We do have other co-hosts online. We have one of our ICT people that are online that'll be admitting people in, and as well as we have one of our staff, contracted staff, Vicky Inose. She's going to be serving as a co-host as well. So she'll be able to assist you with any questions, and she can send me an email or that kind of thing. But I do have to log off as we need my laptop for a meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody have a great session. Looking forward to seeing the recording after.
Yeah.
That's
Wow,
why I asked, and then I'm serving through that session. I will vote yes.
So we're ready. We're ready to go?
Yeah, you were ready.
Okay. Thank you. Anyway, just before lunch, we left off and saying that we're going to talk about the 1850 treaty this afternoon, and it's going to be an important discussion because it's some of the area that's covered with Robinson, Huron, and Superior treaties from that perspective, and leading into what is going to be an important part of the discussion that you're going to have, and you can approach the discussions hopefully after the presentation and with some knowledge of what took place, and you can have a broader discussion with others on the outcome of the treaty. In 1791, the boundaries of Upper Canada were set, and a new colony received jurisdiction over the territory west of the Ottawa River, between the St. Lawrence River, the Great Lakes waterway, and the lands which have been granted to the Hudson Bay Company. The Hudson Bay Company lands, also known as Robert's Land, consisted of the region drained by these rivers flowing into Hudson Bay. Therefore, the Upper Canada northern boundary was determined from the height of land, sometimes referred to as the Arctic watershed. This is significant as it meant that virtually the entire province fell within the Indian Territory as defined by the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which decreed that the lands therein were reserved for the use of the Indians as their hunting grounds. Representatives could purchase portions of the Indian land. Yeah, I guess it went. What it does is it describes when and how to determine the terms and manner of which the crown's representatives would purchase portions of the Indian And so there was a process, even though it was designated, that there was still a process how Indian lands could be purchased by the representative of the government. Whereas it started to have there was fraud and there was abuse had been committed in purchasing lands from Indians, to the great prejudice of the Crown's interest, and to the great dissatisfaction of our people. In order, therefore, to prevent such irregularities from the future, and to the end that the Indians or Native people may be convinced of justice and determined resolution to remove all reasonable cause of discontent. So it was incumbent upon the government to put a system in place that was credible, and whatever was determined, that the process that to be used so that there would be no discontent or dissatisfaction with the Aboriginal people. In order, therefore, to prevent such irregularities for future, to the end that the Indians may be convinced of the Crown's justice, determined resolution to remove all reasonable cause of discontent. With the advice of the Privy Council, strictly joined and required that no private person do presume that may purchase from the said Indians of land reserved for them, reserved to the Indians within these parts of the colonies where they have thought proper to allow settlement, but that out of any time any of said Indians should be inclined to dispose of the said lands. So Indian people, there was a process how Native people could sell those lands if they wanted, but there had to be a set process how that's going to be done. At any time of the said Indians would be inclined to dispose of said land, the same shall be purchased only from us. In other words, this is now words that are coming under the Royal Proclamation that only the Crown can buy the land, and also only the Crown can make a treaty with the Aboriginal people. So in other words, what they were saying, the land is yours. You need to create a big reserve, and just all of those people living within the boundaries can live freely without interference. However, they needed the Crown's permission to sell land, and they needed what they call that permission so that there'll be no abuse of the Aboriginal people, and in trying to sell the land. And these lands were lands that were available people always had the land, but what it allowed was a process how you can do that. And the process also said that there would be no abuse of Aboriginal people in determining. After between the time of the Treaty of Niagara and 1836 in Upper Canada, about 27 sizable land purchases were completed. And over the years, certain procedures, commonly called the treaty system, developed to provide the alienation of Indian title to land, including following: a payment for the land. At first, this involved a single one-time payment of specified amount payable in trade goods, and beginning in 1818, however, from the time of 1818, this was replaced by annuity specified amount payable in goods. Time of the agreement, later the trade goods were replaced with cash. So that was the beginning of the treaty process. Hunting, fishing, occupancy rights of Aboriginal people. When land was purchased for settlement or military purposes, it was seldom occupied completely, either by the forces or by the settlers. In the first land cession agreement, like Crawford, 1783, McGee, 1990, and Lake Simcoe, 1998. First, it was understood that the Indian residents would be allowed to continue to live, hunt, and fish in the unsettled areas, because the growth of settlement was slow. This caused new serious difficulties, because in 1815, migration in the post-war of 1812 increased pressure on Indian society, continuing concern about the Indians with regard to hunting and fishing. These expressed concerns were often recorded in the treaty negotiating minutes, which also recorded the Crown's representative agreed verbally to those rights being retained. No mention of the hunting and fishing rights of the Indians were actually included in a written agreement in 1850. What happened was, imagine, like at the negotiating table, the representative of the Crown saying, yeah, you can continue to hunt and fish. Those rights were retained. But when in the written part of the agreement, it was by convenience, whether it was omitted or completely forgotten, conveniently forgotten, it was not represented in the written part of the treaty, because of these things were verbally agreed to, but rights were retained. But no mention of the hunting and fishing rights of Indians were actually included in the written agreement for 1950. Reserve lands in some of the early treaties, such as 1970 A, purchase of the 1805-1806 Credit River Agreement. It was provided that some specific and limited portions of the surrender tract could be reserved exclusively for Indian youth. These were long-standing village location or traditional and bountiful fisheries. In 1830, the formal adoption of civilization program meant that the reserve became essential to government policy. Where such pockets of Indian settlement have been omitted in previous treaty arrangements, were established by a variety of means. In 1850, when it came time to negotiate a major land cession on the northern shore of Lake Huron and Superior, it became generally accepted that would include provision of reserves. The impetus is to seek such land surrender in the northwestern part of Canada and the West was provided by the mining industry. Previous to this day, the single significant commercial enterprise in the region had been the fur trade. After 1821, that activity was a virtual monopoly of the Hudson Bay Company, although independent traders were active in the region. The Aboriginal people in the region usually referred to as the Northern Ojibwe participated in the activity as well. Traditional methods of food gathering by hunting and fishing. The Aboriginal people were not unified. However, certain gathering, I'm lost. The Indians or the Aboriginal people were not unified. However, certainly there were some relations among those who occupied the long shore of the upper Great Lake, of the two Great Lakes. But the population of some 3,000 people was nonetheless divided into two families, distinct bands. Each had its own band organization, with its own chief. Each group restricted its operation to a clearly defined area. Within this area, the band occupied regular village sites on the coast during the suitable weather and other inland during the winter. Some of the sites either contained or were located close to the mineral deposits, particularly copper. Thus, when entrepreneurs began to exploit mineral deposits, some of which have been known since the days of the father Allou's journey into the region in the 17th century. Their prospecting, urbane, and technical parties were actually moving land which the Indians considered to be theirs. The activity was regarded as trespassing. Responsibility for mineral resources development lie with the provincial crown lands department. Two factors must be noted in relating this branch of government's action in the years of 1845 to 1850. First impetus of the mineral development was inspired by the successful mining operation on the upper Michigan Peninsula. It seemed possible that the copper deposits in particular would be found on both sides of the upper lake. Canadian and British entrepreneurs hoped to replace that success. Second, the department with no experience or presence is guided when requests are made to pursue mining activity on the shores of Lake Huron or Lake Superior. Nor did it have any knowledge for what resources might be found there between 1845 and 1847. The brand took some tentative steps to correct this shortcoming. In 1845, Crown Lands Department issued several regulations through ordering councils regarding the license of prospectors, the boundaries of mining claims, and the price of land containing these metals. In response to the request for mining permits, the government began issuing licenses for that purpose. By May of 1846, 32 licenses had been issued to explore for minerals on the north shore of Lake Superior. Among the first companies to seek opportunities in the Northwest was the Montreal Mining Company, an English firm organized in 1845 with some Canadian support. After conducting surveys on the Lake Superior, the company purchased numerous mining locations from the government. These totaled 180 square miles. A single location extended 5 miles in length and 2 miles in width. Most of these provided significant return for the firm's holding at Bruce Mines on Lake Huron, in which promising that it was later reported up to July 1848 about 1,475 tons of copper had been raised. At some money called 8% copper in return. They The government sought to develop its own data concerning the area. In the summer of 1846, the provincial geologist William Logan examined the Mishippigan and Kaministiquia area, reported that the numerous bays and inlets could provide some safe harbors. Also, there was sufficient arable land to support small settlements. In 1846, investigators of other areas were made by two provincial land surveyors. McNaughton, in 1846, McNaughton and Vittel conducted further surveys in 1847-1848 on the north shore of Lake Huron. Another surveyor, Albert Alter, surveyed location on the north shore of Lake Superior. Other provincial surveyors, as well privately hired geologists, continued to move in the region 1840 and 1849. The activity began to worry the native people in the region, who responded by a warning of newcomers. On at least one occasion, April 7, 1946, a land surveyor in the temporary employment of the government was threatened by Chief Shinwagisis of Garden River. The Indians also wrote letters. Native people wrote letters to complain about the central government. And they wrote complaint letters to the central government. The Indians also wrote letters to the government. The most well-known of these petitions sent by Shinwagisu to the Governor General on 10th of June 1846. In this, the chief referred to his own services to the British during the War of 1812. Now, you know, in terms of the participation of our people in these wars meant something to them. And they also knew that other people, the settlements that were reached, they also knew about the settlement. And a promise had been made that he would be able to live unmolested forever. And that the promise being broken by the men who were moving to the region. The chief Shinwagisu said the promise that were made don't work. They're being broken by those people moving into the region. By moving into his region. He observed further that other Indians in Canada were receiving annuities. That his unrelated bands should also receive money for their land. That he and his people wanted to share what was found on the land. Other companies also made their way to the government. One petition was being published in the Montreal Gazette. So our people already knew that there was some concessions that were made and people were getting money for that. And what it appears is that they wanted to share that. And the government, however, was unreceptive to these complaints. If government officials understood that the Indians wanted a royalty of some kind from the mineral, from the extract from land, and it would appear to have been at least Shenawagis, meaning this was ignored by the government, assuming that complaints were simply about annuities. So they switched it around on them. They still, that is something that's still being done today. I know in terms of one of the active things that are happening, like in the Constance Lake area. There's a mine that was open, and that mine, they promised all kinds of things, and when that happened, and the people started to come along and say, okay, what about this or what about that? They, the government said, what do you want? What do you want? So the chief and council started to lay out what they wanted. But what they concentrated on first was the first item on the, what do you call it, on what was written. The demand that were written. The first one, the first topic of jobs. So the government, the mining company put out the need for people to work, the kind of people they need to work. And what happened was that there was no people. There's not many people. There were some, but not many people were employed in the mine because they didn't have the qualification. They were in the industry itself. And when that happened, there was a there was a feeling by our people that we got tricked into something that by the mining industry, of course, with the support of the government, for that to happen. The next thing you know, outsiders were being brought in. to work in those areas. But listen to this. The important part of it is that not the important, but what happened. They brought in other Native people from other provinces to come and work in it, as long as they were qualified. So when he said, when our leadership sat down with him, they said, well, look at the agreement. And the agreement says that the proponent, which is the mining company, could hire Aboriginal people that were qualified, wherever they came from. So they created that loophole that they could, what do you call it, be able to get around from hiring people, or get around if there was not enough people to do the work. So that a lot of people, I know from the First Nation that I'm from, felt bad about what happened, and they blame the leadership. They blame the lawyers for allowing that to happen. You hire a lawyer, you're supposed to protect your interests. They don't protect your interests. They felt that the solution to the problem was simply to negotiate a land cession. Now I'm going back to the 1850s. Similar to those that had been arranged for the southern part of the province at first. However, that was denied. See, what had taken place before setting some, as we know it today, the government uses its experience in the past and bring that forward. And as that experience builds, they build on that. And that's what happened in this case, in the Robinson period. They felt that the solution to the problem was to negotiate a land cession, as I said before. Treaty similar to those that have been arranged out in part of the province. However, in the report on the matter in 1847, Denny Jameson Papineau, the Commissioner of Crown Lands, and the brother of the more famous Louis Joseph Papineau, rejected any claim to the land by the Northern Indian. So the government sent representatives to reject any kind of, what do you call it, claim to the land. Because the land that the treaty was going to talk about was already owned by people, owned by the province through their legislative process. Papineau did so on the grounds that these bands occupied their land only since the conquest in 1763, and were not therefore original inhabitants. Also thought that scattered bands did not constitute a nation. sufficiently organized to claim territory. Governor's report and agreement were not satisfactory to the Governor General, Lord Elgin. The report was not altogether satisfactory to me either. And after the change of the administration, which took place in the spring, I again brought the subject under the consideration of the government, the Lord Elgin. With the concurrence of the council, I sent Mr. Anderson, a very efficient officer of the Indian Department in the summer of 1848, to examine into these Indian claims. And I endorse for your lordship perusal a copy of the report, which was favorable to the Indian. Most of the correspondence which ensued upon it's with the Crown Lands Office. As the information which he collected was not in all particulars sufficiently complete to enable the government to propose terms to the Indians, he was sent again in the summer with colleagues, Mr. Vidal, on behalf of the provincial government, on behalf of the Ontario government, to complete his inquiries. These gentlemen were on their return from their mission when a disturbance broke out, which I have to report in the current. Lord Elgin observed Anderson's journey of 1848 and his subsequent report were considered insufficient to provide government with the data for course of action regarding the Indian position. Thus Anderson was sent again, this time as a second in command to Alexander Vidal, a feature which Anderson resented, to report more fully on the circumstances in the northern shore of Lake Huron and Lake Superior. There's sufficient report paved the way for future Commissioner William Benjamin Robinson. The two principals, Vidal and Anderson, traveling by separate routes, met at Sault Ste. Marie on September 15, 1849. Their plan was to travel together by schooner to Fort William, in the western extremity of the province. From there to cruise north shore of Lake Superior and Lake Huron by canoe. On this trip, they would locate bands and inform them of the intention of the government currently assessing the strength of Indian claim to the land. Vidal traveled to Sault Ste. Marie from Sarnia, but Anderson's route took him from Cobourg to the Holland River, Lake Simcoe, and Penguin-Tangashine. From there, he moved westward by way of Manitowoc, on the North Shore, on the North Channel, to St. Joseph Island, and to the Head Lake. Two features of his journey warrant mention. First, to the Indians whom he encountered, such as those from the Shagwanda who saw him in Manitowoc. He delivered the message. They should be prepared to meet him. And Vidal on the return journey discussed a treaty. Second, when he reached the western shore of Lake Huron, his party was forbidden to land at Bruce Mine because an epidemic of Corellia struck the community. "24 persons had died already by September the 14th. Moreover, over half of those who were healthy fled the region. The presence of Corellia, and the lateness of the season when Vidal Anderson expedition returned to the area mid-November meant that many bands were not directly contacted that year. The two men and their party reached for Fort William on September 24th. They met with Indians there on the 27th and set out by open canoe to traverse the north shore of Lake Superior. It took until October 13th for them to reach the St. Marie. During the journey, they conferred with bands, Fort William, Igneous Island, Bishop Garden River, the Sasagi Band, such that the Serpent River were absent and did not make any significant contact until October 26th, when they were able to speak to the Assembly of Manitowoc. From there, they traveled north to the North Channel as part of the brief encounter with the chief's son at the French River. They were unable to find any band until they reached Penetanguishene. There on November 3rd, they did manage a lengthy discussion with those chiefs who had assembled. The journey had not been as successful as they had been hoped because it was late in the season. And probably also because the Corella named Coloria threat. Many bands who inhabited these shores were simply not available. This point had been made by several researchers who have examined the background of the Robinson-Superior Treaty. And invariably, the commission and the reports are criticized because of them. Another deficiency in the documentation surrounding these inquiries is the sparseness of detail in the journals of both Anderson and Vidal. For example, neither man identified the band or chief whom they have met at the Manitowoc or Penetanguishene. Yet the commission should not be written off as a complete failure to report and should add any claim to territory in question. The claim of present occupants of this tract of land delivered from their forefathers have from time immemorial handed upon its unquestionably as good as that of any of the tribes who have received compensation for certain cessions of their rights in other parts of the province, therefore entitles them to similar remuneration. The commissioners, therefore, said to the assemblies of Indians where, when they could, spoke to individuals who they encountered. In this fashion, they were able to inform those they saw of the intention of the government regarding land surrender. One can assume that this information was passed on among the Indians themselves, also allowing for the deficiency already noted. The commissioner did not provide a substantial amount of information regarding the condition in the northwestern portion of the province to people who had little acquaintances with it. This information included the approximate number of separate bands, their traditional locations, their general hopes and desires, temperament. It was on the basis of this information that the government signed a special commissioner, William Benjamin Robinson, the task of renegotiating a treaty for the surrender of these lands. Perhaps the most significant feature of these conditions in the Northwest was reported by Anderson Vidal, was that the range of Indian attitudes toward the possibility of a land cession agreement in general reported that the commissioners, the Indians of the region, were friendly toward the idea of a treaty with the exception of Ban, Fort William, and Sault Ste. Marie. Those were the largest gatherings addressed by the two men. These exceptions would seem to be a greater importance, but the report suggested. Shinguisists, principal chief there in Sault Ste. Marie, announced that his band would negotiate through Mr. Alan McDonald. Donnell, a lawyer and a mining promoter, who had begun to develop sites on the Lake Superior, who had acquired considerable influence among the Garden River Indians. A few weeks later, he would also head the party that would attack mining installations at Mica. Anderson and Vidal being told at Fort William that Donnell had been responsible for spreading the rumor of Anderson's deceit. For that reason, also because it was accepted policy to deal only directly with the Indian, the commissioners refusing to deal with him. When MacDonald urged on by Anishinaabe proceeded to speak to the commissioners adjourning the meeting. Fidel then left the chamber, but Anderson remained to observe while MacDonald spoke in the most inflammatory way. 2 days later, October the 8th, Chief Augustine, the eldest son of Anishinaabe, 3 others from the Garden River Band sought out Anderson and Fidel. The commissioner reported that subsequent meeting followed. We conversed freely, but those on the position in which the Indians were placing themselves by refusing to talk with them, insisting on Gill's agency, and pointed out only of such proceeding. Augustine said that he altogether was also disappointed in MacDonald saying against the governor, as he did at the council, that a person who interpreted his speech had not done so correctly. Further, that he had misunderstood the question about MacDonald being a better friend than the government, in which he had replied in the affirmative. He thought and asked that if they considered him better able to manage their business than themselves. During their journey, the agreement with the idea of land sale, 2 men were emphatic in their recommendation that the government should proceed to secure such an agreement as quickly as possible. Moreover, they said the lands purchased would not be restricted to the area thought to be rich in minerals. It will not be advisable to propose the cession of narrow strips upon the lakeshore, merely including the present mining tract. So there is a general wish on the part of the chief to cede the whole, with the exception of small reserves for the use of respective bands. Little, if any, difference need to be made in the term offered. For all that is known to be value in situated on the front. they will still retain undisturbed possession of their hunting ground in the interior. In fact, whenever may be given to them for the surrender of their rights, they must be gainers. They relinquish nothing but a mere nominal title. They will continue to enjoy their present advantages and will not be poor because the superior intelligence and industry of their white brethren are enabling them from the few limited portions of their territory, which never could be in any particular service to themselves. The vital Vidal and Anderson report, having concluded the possibility of successful negotiating, was very high. That it should be done because fairness suggested it. And it should be done quickly. That's for recommendations for the consideration of the government. Suggestions were made regarding the size of the annuity payments, the preservation of hunting and fishing rights, and the establishment of reserve lands, including location and size. The report also provided information regarding the principal men, locations of several bands claiming right to this specific location. The population of these bands was estimated to be about 2,000. Finally, Vidal and Anderson observed a few unique issues regarding the lands in the Northwest. Throughout the region, but at the Salt in particular, to St. Marie, there was a substantial number of half-breeds who had close connections with the Indian. So some instances residing with them. Some instances residing with them consistently. These persons could be expected to demand inclusion in any treaty agreement that may be made. There were also problems concerning Indian deeds and leases. The Northwest Company had secured land in 1788. Missionaries had granted land on Garden River and several mining leases, including a 99 years lease to McDonald and Bishop Garden Island, and also being made with respect to the reserve. The bands requested location for traditional fishing or hunt rendezvous spots. This was an understandable request, but was observed in some cases these choices involved either mining location or land that lay within the Hudson Bay Company territory. The list of reserve areas requested by the band during the visit of Vidal and Anderson is included here as a name as a means of comparing these requests to the schedule of reserves included in final treaties. at the present location shown in the map, which is included in the research report. The words taken from Bill's report. Fort William Band. There's a track on the banks of the river. About a mile from the mouth, including the Grant. Fort William Chief, West at Nibigan. Pick band be brought into the reserve. Their chiefs, whom we did not see, would probably desire a reserve at their respective land, their respective areas. The Wiikwemkoong Chief, the Wiikwemkoong Band, which is to receive tracts about the bay adjoining the Wiikwemkoong River on the west and extending from there to the Riviere au Dory, which is about 4 miles. The Sault Marie Band, besides Wiikwemkoong Island and the location of Manasses east to McDonald, wish to reserve from point per Creek, which is St. Mary's River, to Squash Point, Lake Joe, about 12 miles frontage, including 6 mining locations. They wish also to confirm that some big company claim to the St. Marie. The Mississauga Band, a reserve of Riviere de Born, to include a little lake on their farm. They also wish to inform Mr. Sayer, a small tract of Mississauga River formerly sold to him. The Serpent River Band, a small reserve on the mouth of the Serpent River, where they had ground cultivated. In Spanish, a reserve on the banks of the Spanish River, located on determined pond. And there's Shiba now and man, Shiba. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce some of these names, but the reserve at the head of the bay near Oagoshnook, and the east adjoining W.H. Bolton's mining location, the French River, a reserve where they now cultivate the land, and the head of the deep bay near the village and distant from a mile. Masai gaze, and I know I'm certainly not what you call pronouncing these names right. Beni Quena Stom Ban, which a small reserve on the side of Wiikwemkoong River, about 5 miles from the mouth of Tiguan, Tiguan Band, a small reserve at Point Barry, and Nabi Bisik reserve between Moose River and Barry Sound, extending half a day's journey back. So this is sort of the background for reaching towards how in the areas that where the reserves were and I apologize. My pronunciation of the areas is not very good, and I'm sure I stand to be corrected with some pronunciation. But nevertheless, we got to move forward. The making of the Robinson Spirit treaties. Vidal Anderson report heard speed in reaching land cession agreement with the Indians of Lake Huron and Lake Superior. The McBay incident intensified urgency. The provincial government determined to settle the Northwestern land question quickly. And the man chosen for the job was William Benjamin Robinson. His tasks were recommended by the Executive Council January 18, 1980. And approved by Lord Elgin in Council, January 11. It was a happy appointment for Robinson, who was a competent individual who served as a government commissioner of the Public Works from 1846 to 1848. He also had experience in Indian trade. With the attendant knowledge of Indian language, common that is endured in endeavor provided, also closely connected to the Tory party. His brother, John Beverly Anderson, had been a pillar of the family company and was currently serving as Chief Justice. And his brother-in-law, Samuel Gervais, a recent Chief Superintendent of Indian Affairs. This association, however, created anger among the reformers who charged patronage to the appointment. Robinson's position was delicate, therefore he was expected to save the government from further embarrassment in the Northwest. He had to do so under close scrutiny from the reformers. He was also first person outside the Indian Department appointed to take a major Indian land surrender. His instruction issued by order of the council 18 April 16, 1980, provided him with some problems too. He was to buy as much land as possible, not settled for less than north shore of Lake Superior and the mining site along the eastern shore of Lake Superior. To accomplish this, he was given a budget of £7,500, which was expected to cover the cost of negotiations, as well as annual payments and would grow out of them. It was also he was also given orders against using gifts in order to promote the negotiation, since gifts had been a standard practice for over a century. These conditions were awkward and could easily, as it been before, a cause of breach, wilderness protocols, and negotiation. Armed by the approval of the governor, his own experience, the Vidal Anderson report, and his instructions from Executive Council, made an initial trip into the Indian country April and May of 1850. The journey took him as far as Mississippi, simply an exploratory exercise to meet some of the men, to acquaint himself with the territory, announcing his intention of returning in a formal negotiation during the summer. The actual negotiation began in St. Marie in August, before the formal council was held. Robinson visited the bands in the area and greeted a chief from Lake Superior as they arrived for council. He was assisted to that by friendly fur traders, who was also at the visit of the Governor General in August 31st. Lord Elgin also pardoned Chief Chenegwes and Nobinago Anipagon, and the two Métis leaders for their part in the Make a Bay affair. Apparently, these efforts had dissipated some of the bitterness of the previous fall for Robinson, noted that all seems well, disposed in a treaty of terms. By the time the formal and final negotiations began in September, Robinson had determined to seek all the land on both sides of Lake Huron, Lake Superior, but an agreement could not come easily. When he made an offer of £4,000 in cash, and a perpetual annuity of £1,000 for the entire region, the chief proved and requested time to consider the term. In formal session on the 6th, Robinson stressed that the band would continue to enjoy their hunting and fishing rights. Sunset Center settlement unlikely in the barren regions of Canadian Shield. These pursuits would not be hampered as they have been in the eastern region of Upper Canada. These arguments satisfied Chief Hoodchat and the Lake Superior bands, following his Heath lead, signed the treaty on September 7. Shinwakus remained unconvinced, however, that the other Lake Huron band followed him in refusing to sign. It would appear that Tangusis felt more money could be gained. He had demanded an annual penalty of $10 per head, $10 per head, which would have translated into $20,000. He also attempted to secure land, reserve land for the half-breeds at the rate of 100 acres per head. Robinson stood firm. He would do nothing for the half-breed because his instruction ordered him to deal with Indians, not whites. He also suggested he did suggest that they could be given land on the Indian Reserve, and the band agreed. He was equally firm with respect to the money, and stated candidly that without a treaty, he simply take the money back to Toronto. Perhaps it was this treaty that convinced Singwishes. More likely, he was convinced by other chiefs over the weekend of September 8 that it has already been reserved. Some, including his son Augustine, did not share his strong feeling. In any event, on September 9, Singwishes and that other Lake Huron chief present signed the agreement with Robinson and had prepared the surrender of the Lake Huron shore. Though these two agreements signed in 1850 to St. Marie, William B. Robinson secured virtually the whole of the upper Canadian Northwest for government use, generally referred to as the Robinson-Huron Treaty. The agreement of September 9 called for the cession of Lake Huron shoreline, including the islands of Manchadash Bay and Banatwani Bay, islands at the height of land, inland at the height of land, and the agreement of September 7, known as the Robinson Superior Treaty, gave the Crown the shoreline of Lake Superior, including islands from the Banatwani Wiikwemkoong and the Pigeon River. Inland is the height of land, and the first contained 35,700 square kilometers of land, sold by a total Indian population of 1,240 people. The latter is occupied by 1,420 people and contains 16,700 square miles of territory. The terms and conditions of the Robinson Superior Treaty were based on provisions of land cession agreement that also contained several innovations. Most treaties provided a schedule of reserves. They were specified on Lake Superior under the Robinson Superior Treaty 23, were specified in the Robinson Superior Treaty 20 to 21 under the Robinson-Huron Agreement. In these cases, the individual bands were allowed to choose their own sites, which were actually locations of long-standing usage as a summer encampment, which limited agriculture. Practice of having chiefs select specific reserves had been used in earlier agreements, such as the Credit River Treaty of 1806 and the Longwoods surrender in 1822, but the practice was formalized and extended to Robinson Superior Treaty. It would be formalized further. 1862 Manitoulin Treaty, when an allotment of 100 acres per county and of 5 was adopted. The Robinson treaties contained sufficient clauses regarding the other features of Indian white relations, questions of mineral rights, the half-breeds, hunting and fishing. Both treaties contained a clause stating that the reserve could not be sold or released without the consent of the chief superintendent of Indian Affairs. It was now in such a clause where simply an acceptance of principle that dated back to the Royal Proclamation of 1763 had been followed since then, but is new in the principle was actually written into the treaty. It seems likely that the original purpose of the government seeking these land sales, promotion of mining activity, inspired, and its inclusion in this time by signing these treaties, and the Indians agreed to refrain from interfering with mining activity in ceded area. But if valuable deposits were found, any of the Indian reserves, if Japan chose to sell it off, the sale would be conducted by the superintendent of Indian Affairs for the sole use and benefit of to the best advantage, whatever that means. Another consideration Another consideration which grew from the stipulation in each agreement was on the issue of half-breed rights, which were raised by the Indians, both Patel and Anderson Commission with Robinson. If the bans were forbidden, if the bans were forbidden from selling or leasing the land, they could give it to the half-breed by permitting permission for mixed blood to join the band or share in the annuity money. Robinson suggested that could be done. This matter was resolved by requiring the half-breed declare themselves either Indian or non-Indian. It could be argued that by requiring the choice, the government effectively prevented development of many communities in Ontario, similar to that grew in Western Canada. Hunting and fishing rights for Indians in the ceded area has been implied in the very early land cession and had formed part of the negotiation. A generation later, in such agreement, such as the Rice Lake Agreement, 1819, the Robinson Treaty were the first to include these provisions directly. This is established that Indians were to have full and free privilege to hunt for the territory. Ceded by them, and to fish in the water thereof as they hereto being in the habitat of doing, except in areas that would become private property. The actual remuneration for the land, although it included the use of the annuities, which by 1850 had been in place for over 3 decades, was unique in several ways. Each of the Indians received a total sum of 2,000 pounds. An annual of 5,000 pounds was to follow each year. For the first time, these sums were to be paid in cash, as it was previously, as previous arrangement. The annuities would decrease with the decline population. The cost at critical figures were 2/3 of the population, which at that point annuity would be reduced proportionally. If the sale of land surrendered produced a greater than expected return, the annuities would be increased at the Crown's pleasure. The postscript would be divided regarding the boundaries of the Robinson-Huron Treaty. Robinson himself and the Indians of the North Shore were satisfied that the land described in the treaty had been duly sold. The Wiikwemkoong bands, however, were not. On his return from Sault Ste. Marie, Robinson stopped at Manitoulin Island. There on September 1850, he was met by 3 chiefs: Yellowhead, Anishinaabe, and Snake, who registered their claim to the island, to the land near the Zipper River. They recently concluded a treaty included in that territory. At this meeting, Robinson reported to the Chippewas claim by promising to make inquiries at the land and Indian officers in Toronto. After the success of his mission, the commissioner likely considered the claim to be a minor error. Could be easily resolved by providing Chief with expense money, but it was not. The claim would be repeatedly raised over decades under the investigation and negotiated surrounding Williams Treaty of 1923, established rights of Lake Simcoe Chippewa Band and the land lying north and east of these villages in order to clarify the situation, the shoreline between Machinas Bay and the French River inland to the High Land was included in this arrangement. So that sort of a long-winded way about the treaty itself. Now, the negotiations that took place seemed to be very one-sided, and that's very consistent with other treaties. For instance, like in Treaty 9, the terms of the treaty were negotiated between Canada and the province of Ontario, and it sets out the terms of the terms of the treaty, and the commissioners were not allowed to promise anything else other than those were already agreed to by the government. And this is a point of contention with our people in Anishinaabe Nation or Treaty Number 9. And will continue to be a point of contention until we work toward a solution with the province of Ontario. And similarly, I guess it's going to be the point of contention with other other First Nation. It'll be a point of contention with all the different where there's agreements and they're willing to sit down and talk about coming to grips with the outstanding issues within the treaty process that we see. Our researchers have researched those areas, and I'm sure they will be coming to the community and talk about them and say, well, okay, these are different things. And that is because the commissioner was given specific orders and specific things to do by ordering council. He couldn't change it. There's no way that he could have changed any of the provisions that were given to him to execute. So that is something to remember. It's not what do you call it? It's not an issue that said we can't do this, or we can do this, or we can't do it. It's that you have to be cognizant of the fact that whoever came there, and you have to remember about the time. The time there were no telephones, there were no communication between the commissioner and the officer. I'm not trying to make excuses for the treaty commissioners, but what I'm talking about, the importance that lack of connection. And our people had that too, because not all people were living on the reserve in the area of the reserve. Some people were living in the outer areas on their traditional territory, whether they lived there year round or whatever. But they weren't at that time necessarily had the information that they need to have. And a similar thing can be said for people that knew the information, or even in the community. Some of them simply did not attend meetings. Some people just prefer to be by themselves, which is one of our traditions. And some people prefer to be left alone. There was no way of saying that these people would have access to information that would what do you call it, provide for them how to analyze things. For instance, like the monies that were offered to them, how do they know? Because they probably didn't have any money. And because of that, they couldn't express an opinion whether, but some people did. That was, and knowing how the government operates, they determine how much it is. And that's what they did. They said, this is how much it is, and this is how much you're gonna get, and not anymore. So when the commissioner was brought into the community with that kind of endorsements from the higher ups, if I may call them that, he couldn't change it, because if an example, if one of the chiefs wanted to have wanted to get benefit from the mining and stuff like that, the commissioner would then have to pull up camp and go back to Toronto, and probably come back the following year to discuss that. There were no negotiations per se with Aboriginal people. It was a one-sided take it or leave it approach that they used. And I imagine that this was the goal of the government, is to get access to the land, to get access to the resources that were in place. But they had to do it relatively quickly, because they didn't have the time to be able to sit down and negotiate. Because the negotiations were in those days were set. Like I said, the agreement was already reached between the two governments, and then that was brought to the people by the commissioner. The commissioners had no way of asking the higher ups what should be done or what should not be done. So negotiations were set firm, and to the point where the time, I know in the, what do you call it, in the treaties, for instance, like Treaty 9, they came in one one evening or one afternoon. I had a meeting the next day, and then they were on their way to the next community. So in that span of time, we were expected to understand what the treaty was all about. And just think that yourself, how the time you need to understand the provisions of any treaty. It is very difficult process. Like I'm good at translating in documenting Cree, and some of the documents that I've translated have take a long time. Some of them take a year. Try to translate what a treaty is actually saying. And I imagine we're here almost two hours just to read parts of it. So those are the impediments that are at our disposal that we need to deal with. The government reads from their documents saying this was the order in council that was provided to the commissioner, and and everybody agreed to that. And you look at 1850 treaty, there's gaps, there's things that are missing. The Anderson and Vidal commission couldn't even name who was at the meeting. They couldn't even say what was discussed. Now, whether it was out of that, the government interpreted because of what everybody else said, that these people are happy to make treaty. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because there's too many gaps. But I guess one thing that I'm saying is that, and I know you're doing it, and I take my hat off to you, because it is important to do it. You are looking at filling the gaps, and also interpreting some of the treaty clauses. Because if you didn't interpret some of those clauses to our people, to your people, we did some of that with the Anishinaabe Nation. And people ask us, say, what is that really what happened? Say, yeah. And then there's a different insight into the treaty question when that happened. There's different reactions to it. People get very emotional, get very upset. Whether it was intended or not by the government, that's totally irrelevant. I did a presentation one time to college students at the college here in Thunder Bay, Confederation College. And when I got done with the presentation, one young fellow got up out of that group. And there's about 24 of them. And he said to me, sir, he said, I know you were not involved in the treaty, you're just bringing the message forward. But as I sit here and listen to your story, he said, I cannot help feel that. He said, pardon my language, you guys got screwed. And that is from a non-native person telling me that. And to hear that from that person, but what I see is the beginning of some of the reconciliation we're talking about in a treaty process, because we want to resolve that. And I know darn well that our people are capable. You know, this morning there was Alan. I was looking at, no, last night I was looking at a document. Alan Ojik, I think his name is he's from the island, from Wiki, talking about the treaty, the 1764 Niagara Treaty of Niagara. So you have your own people that are becoming experts in certain areas of the treaty process. So it's getting to be 5 to 3. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 1862 treaty on the island that took place, but I'm also going to talk about the broader aspect of treaty making in Canada, more from the perspective that there were treaties that were made, or peace treaties that were made in Canada with our Aboriginal people. There was the pre-Confederation treaties. One of them is the Robinson-Superior Treaty. That's one, and then post, we call it Confederation treaties. That's treaties 1 to 11, and then there's some modern, what do you call it, modern day treaties that were made, and you can see the significant changes. That's what I want you to see, is the significant changes from when the first non-native people hit our shores, and treaties of friendship, so on and so forth, up to some of the treaties that have been made today, because some of them are significant. For instance, like the new treaty that was made with, I forget what First Nation it is now, but with Nishka, there's things in there that our people talk about. The James Bay Agreement, there's things in there now that our people are talking about, saying, well, we want some benefits from our land. So these things can happen. These things can happen. It's not that they can't happen. They can happen. We don't even have to, what do you call it, tear up the treaty to make them happen. It can be, the treaty can be there, it can be a side product from the treaty. So that so our First Nations can benefit from their land. Because it's reality, that's what we're looking for. So in that, I'll close off the session, and and see you all tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And I'll be talking more about that tomorrow, and it's sort of guide what I'm hoping for, guides you from one end, what happened to begin the process. Now we're coming to what are some of the things that are possible in what you call in the treaty making process, because it is important. It's not only that we've identified that we can do it, and we should do it for the benefit of all, for our people, so that as we move forward, it becomes something of a better relationship than what we have today, so that some of the money, X million dollars that the government is spending trying to protect themselves from us, can come to our people, and we spend it for ourselves. So there's a lot of ways of doing it, and like I said, it should be done, and we should do it. It's simple as that. Whether do it individually as First Nations, or a group of First Nations, or whatever, treaty area First Nations, so on and so forth. Let's get the job done. So with that, good night, and I'll see everybody tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
Miigwech Bentley.
Miigwech.
Thank you, everybody, for spending the evening or afternoon with us. So next, we're going to have Daryl Mantwabi at 6 p.m. to 9. So please come back to join us then.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for Bentley?
Okay.
Okay, I guess everyone's saying miigwech, chimigwech.
Miigwech.
Bamapi.